G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here, and as you can see by the sky behind me, it's a sort of a gloomy, cool, not quite raining sort of a day, but yeah, it's the middle of the day and I've only just really sort of poked my head outside to have a look, and I've been sitting inside scrolling on YouTube, and last week a fella called Ben Roberts Smith, the most highly decorated Australian military living service person, um, retired though he is, he got the judgment on his defamation case, and apparently he'd never heard of Chief Justice Marcus Einfeld, because Marcus Einfeld retired from the New South Wales Supreme Court after 20 years sitting basically hearing defamation cases. And what Einfeld said was it occurred to him that somewhere between 95 and 98% of successful defamation litigants, right, they won their case. They brought a case to court. You called me a blackguard, scoundrel, scumbag. You defame my character. I want to prove that you did me wrong and I'm going to drag it through the courts. They emerged successful, and he said when they come out of court, they regret ever having commenced the proceedings, because the process of going through the court not only keeps the matter in the forefront of the public opinion, because it keeps resurfacing for the mention hearings and then this development and that development. Then when it starts to be actually heard, all the evidence is public, and all the argumentation and everything and all the various points, that all gets debated in the court of public opinion. And what Einfeld said was 95 to 98% of successful defamation litigants emerge from proceedings wishing they had never ever filed a suit. So this Benjamin Robert Smith VC, by 2018 there were newspaper stories concerning dastardly acts done in Afghanistan, Absurdistan, call it what you will. And this bloke, he signed up in 1996 or 97. He done 2 tours in Timor. I think he did 4 or 6 tours in Afghanistan. And in 2012, they gave him the Victoria Cross, right? The Wickedtory Creutzer. You put it in German, like Queen Victoria was a Bavarian. The Wickedtory Creutzer. And it's the highest medal for gallantry that you can get in the Australian Armed Forces, and everybody reveres it. And the people who've won it previously have been held up as pillars of the community, even if they come out of it PTSD, shattered head fuck veterans who, did nothing ever afterwards and then died in obscurity. Albert Jacker, where are you? So anyway, he gets the Victoria Cross, and he got it for running uphill into machine gun fire when the rest of his Special Air Services platoon was taking cover. It was as if he could not imagine himself ever being hit. He was the typical World War II movie star hero that when the cameras turned up in Vietnam, as soon as they saw a cameraman, the Americans would jump up and start running around thinking they were John Wayne. Yeah, well, that's what Benji Robert Smith WC actually did in real life, and he got his medal. And he was larger than life, 6.5 feet tall. But by 2018, there were stories coming out that he was doing things like killing unarmed civilians because they'd gone out on patrol and couldn't find any actual Taliban, Al-Qaeda, terrorists, local patriots defending their ancestral homeland from invading foreign farces. He couldn't find any of them. So, they'd push an old bloody goat herder over a cliff, or shoot a retarded kid, or, make the recruits shoot somebody because, you got to get your first kill in. You've only just joined the squadron of the regiment. And the stories were getting worse and worse and worse. And I think he's, rumoured to have been involved in 8 killings or so, maybe 12. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of them. And he was able to keep it all together. But the people who watched him do his heroic shit, they started coming home to Australia and going doolally plop from the PTSD of watching this shit with his VC, running around doing all the sort of stuff that Australia spent 100 years being proud of killing Nazis for, and 100 years being proud of killing the fucking Germans who threw up nuns and caught them on the bayonets and then raped babies. Or no, did they get that one backwards? Maybe they actually raped the nuns and caught the babies on their bayonets. Never know, because it was a propaganda story that never fucking happened, whether it was in Belgium in 1914 or in Kuwait in 19, what was it, 90, 91? 91. Yeah, didn't happen. It's a standard propaganda story. Yeah. Anyway, Benji Robert Smith. The people who watched him do his shit and the people who served with the people that he taught to do stupid shit. Yeah, they come home and went crackers and turned up at the psychologists, looking for help and assistance. And it was the psychologists dealing with the head fuck veterans who'd been sent mad by watching stuff like what Ben Robert Smith was doing. That's who actually blew the whistle. That's how come the Brereton report was started. And that's how come General Brereton, Colonel Brereton, whatever he bloody was, he come up with it 2 years ago, just before COVID. Absolutely irrefutable, really hard research, interviewed a whole bunch of people. Yeah, we got a problem with the Special Air Services Regiment and a commando brigade as well. They actually they disbanded one entire squadron of the SAS regiment to get rid of the toxic culture of just killing for the sake of killings because, ambush is murder and murder is fun, which is what the Americans used to teach in their jungle warfare school in 1968. And I know because I read fucking Lieutenant William Calley's book on My Lie and why he thought that was okay, what he did. Anyway, there I was sitting in my little hovel on a rainy day. Oh, hello. Have you been in the background wanting to be fed all the time, have you? Yeah, come on. Start talking and an audience will assemble. Hello. Come on. That's a girl. Yeah, you've already had yours. I was just catching your daughter up on it. So, okay, there I was. Gloomy day, not much to do. And I figured I'll have a bit of a look and see what the state of the art is on the Ben Robert Smith thing, because the detailed reasons for the judgment, which got thrown out of court, by the way, he lost all 8 or 9 of his defamation cases, 105 days of evidence heard in court, slowly, laboriously over 2 years because of shutdowns and all the rest of it. Yep, I think the legal cost of running the trial is something like 13 or 14 million Australian dollars. The 3 newspapers that he sued and their journalists, they've all got their costs covered even if they lost, and they were prepared to defend their situation. The judge found that 4 of the 8 or 12 war crimes murders most likely happened exactly as all of the newspaper things said. The bullying, the lying, the interfering with witnesses, the obscuring of evidence, even bashing up the girlfriend who got drunk and let people know that she was fucking Benji Robert Smith, WC, the war hero killer. Yeah, when he didn't want anybody to know because it wasn't his wife, it was just a girlfriend that he took to a party. He took her back to a motel and he's supposed to have beat her up for letting people know when she was drunk that, she was fucking a war hero. Okay. So he did it all. That's what the judge said. He lost everything, got thrown out of court. So his boss, Kerry Stokes, who used to be the head of the Australian War Memorial, where they had a life-size painting of Ben Robert Smith, where they had Ben Robert Smith's uniform on display, where they had all of his medals and cunt magnets and trinkets, hanging on a watered silk ribbon, with which Napoleon said he could lead men to their deaths by the thousand, nay, by the tens of thousands. Yeah, all the Benjis are on display in the War Memorial. And they're stammering and, we don't know whether we're going to take them out or whether we're going to put up a new caption which explains that once upon a time we spent 12 years revering this murderous fucking scumbag, this liar who besmirched Australia and Australia's military reputation and the reputation of the elite Special Air Services Regiment, the fella who dragged Australia's name through the fucking mud. Yeah, we've still got him in the War Memorial. He's the biggest turd the Australian Army ever laid. Because his father was a lawyer. His father retired as a general in the Judge Advocates Corps. And Benji was a warrant officer. He couldn't make it to fucking first lieutenant. Couldn't make it to second lieutenant either. Certainly didn't get up to general. Now, why would that be? How? How could somebody who was such a good lawyer that they retired as a general in the Army's legal, beagle and briefcase fuck you department, you will not complain to us if our fucking tank sets your farm on fire. Somebody who was that good as a lawyer, how does his son grow up on army bases where daddy's an army lawyer and every other kid on the base knows you don't fuck with the army lawyer's kid? It's his sandpit. Okay, if he says it's his sandpit, it's his sandpit. So the poor little bastard grew up untouchable. But how come daddy's a lawyer and a general and Benji's a fucking warrant officer? That much better than sergeant, but not as good as an officer. Not up to snuff. You know, hasn't got it in the head. Too easily led astray. Don't do a lot of dumb shit. You know, good to obey. You can expect him to obey the laws of the land because his daddy's a fucking lawyer in the army. That's what they thought. Poor silly bastards. Didn't realise he's grown up absolutely untouchable. He thinks he can get away with whatever because he always has, like Donald Trump. Only Benji stayed in that whole army thing where you don't cross him because his dad's a bloody lawyer. His dad's a general in the Judge Advocate Corps. He gets to do whatever he wants. Enlist, yeah, sure. Promote, not bright enough. Why is he not bright enough? Have a look at how old he is. Go back. Did you know that one episode in the first trimester when mum's blood alcohol level comes up to 0.1% blood alcohol, right? What that is twice too pissed to drive. Oh, I've been trying to get pregnant for years and finally I got a positive test stick. Let's go out and celebrate. Cocktails before wine with the dinner or champagne or whatever, and then brandy snifter, and then go home and have a couple of after dinner drinks or nightcaps or whatever. Go up to 10% blood alcohol and shave 10 IQ points. Oh, sorry, 0.1% blood alcohol and shave 10 IQ points off your fetus's potential IQ. General's son can't get beyond warrant officer. That's pretty fascinating, isn't it? I wonder, because see what happens is the baby's liver can't produce ethanol dehydrogenase. So mummy gets pissed, her blood alcohol comes up, her liver produces ethanol dehydrogenase and she metabolises the alcohol. But while her blood alcohol level is up, the alcohol flows across the placental barrier and the fetus gets pissed. And the fetus stays pissed while the neurons are developing and hooking up in all sorts of retarded, shrunken, piss-pot ways. And then as mummy sobers up, the alcohol percolates back across the the placental barrier, and mummy's liver metabolises it. So mummy might be only pissed for 4 or 5 hours, but the kid stays pissed for about 8 or 10. Yeah? So that's how your fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is achieved. And back in the day, drinking a lot was not considered bad. It was only people were only considered silly if they drank a lot and they failed to hold their alcohol well. Part of the interview process to go into the army for an officer cadet for Portsea was to be taken out to dinner and served alcohol. And anybody who lost their shit on a couple of glasses of wine got the rejection letter. I don't think it would be at all beyond the bounds of possibility and maybe well within the realm of probability to suggest that the reason Benjamin Robert Smith WC has turned out without the sense to know that when you're up to your nose in a hole full of shit, you stop fucking digging, you dopey prick. But like I said, Donald Trump or Rupert Murdoch, grown up never ever having to suffer any consequences because they had protection as a kid and they thought it was everlasting. So I was about to read my comment on the Sky News thread to camera. I actually literally had the tripod and the mobile phone set up to do the job. And what this was supposed to be just the introduction to the video. And I was going to go in and you were going to get to listen to me reading from the phone. With this phone videoing the aforementioned phone sitting on a tripod. But I thought maybe it'd be better off if I just talked to camera outside and didn't stick you with me trying to finger text scroll while reading on the mobile phone in the darkness of the hut. So anyway, Kerry Stokes was the head of the War Memorial when Benji Robert Smith's clobber was put on display, and it's still on display, but Kerry Stokes is no longer the boss of the War Memorial. He was, however, Benji Robert Smith's boss at Channel 7, where Benji Robert Smith used to be the general manager of the Brisbane office, the Brisbane TV station. Ever since he started his defamation suit, he's been on leave. He was in Bali. He didn't even show up to court the day his lawyer showed up to find that they'd lost probably $7 million worth of legal work. And Kerry Stokes and Channel 7 had lent him the money to take the suit to court. So I'm guessing that Benji Robert Smith owes his ex-boss however much it cost them. And I think Benji Robert Smith is about to get stuck with the 3 newspapers' total costs as well. So he's about $15 million in debt and unemployed. And I'll bet his fucking military pension will not cover that. No wonder the bloody swamp wallaby's spewing. Can you imagine how Benji Robert Smith feels? Chew on that cud, Benjamin. What do you reckon, mate? Pause button didn't actually function during that pan. What else is there, I wonder, that can be said about the lamentable case of Benjamin Robert Smith, WC, war criminal, Wickedtory Creutzer, Kreutze, Kreutzer. Well, I don't know whether he's got any kids, but if he has, then his kids, they're entered in a different lottery entirely, because 1998 and 2000, the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare Statistics issued 2 separate research papers. The first one was morbidity and mortality in Vietnam combat veterans and their children, and the second one was the updated morbidity and mortality in combat veterans and their children, because the response they got to the first one caused them to go and re-examine the whole thing, and they found that the effect they discovered is not limited to Vietnam veterans. It is a, quote, generic effect of combat. And it doesn't matter where you fight, it doesn't matter who you fight, it doesn't matter which weapons you use in the fight, and it doesn't matter what weapons were used against you in the fight. What matters is being in combat. What matters is feeling that your life is threatened and having your adrenal glands go through the squitters and fill you full of shit-o deer hormones. When you think that you're going to be killed, it does things to you. All right? Now, let's bear in mind that Benji of the Robert Smith variety got his VC for running uphill into the machine gun fire as if he didn't know that he could be hurt. He didn't believe it. Now, he also did 2 tours, combat tours in Timor. Maybe not that much combat, but he was over there. And they worried about it. And then he did his 4 or 6 tours in Afghanistan. That's a lot of time to be sitting in a camp waiting for a rocket attack in the middle of the night. They reckon the reason that Vietnam screwed as much as it did with people's heads was because there was no rear area. They couldn't go up to the front for 2 or 3 weeks and then come back and have a rest for 2 or 3 weeks. It was continuous exposure to combat. They never knew when they were going to get mortared, rocketed, shelled, shot at, when they're going to tread on a landmine. Booby traps were all over the place. Well, it's kind of like that in Afghanistan, because there's a foreign force invading, and Afghanistan's called the graveyard of empires. You know, they defeated the British Empire 2 or 3 times. They defeated the Russians. They defeated the Americans. Huh? What's new for them? It's a way of life. They've been fighting since bloody Genghis Khan went over there and sowed salt in their fields. Okay, so Benji Robert Smith, something like 8 tours of duty, shooting at people. Puts me in mind of something that Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman said. He was an American, what they call a Green Beret, Special Forces or something like that. He'd been to Vietnam, I think 2 times, maybe 3. And when he come out of it, he was captured by thinking about all of the killing and what people do when they're killing and how they respond when their friends are getting killed. And it drove him to become the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Chicago's professor of killology. And in the late 90s, he was wiring up policemen and policewomen with biomedical sensors and wireless radio transmitters, and they'd be on patrol and somebody would start shooting at them, and he would get the microphone picking up the first gunshot, and at the same time he would get their heart rate and their respirations. So he was able to really study people's reactions to combat. And another thing that he was bedazzled by was his looking at the statistics for how long it takes in a combat zone before it fucks you in the head. And what he said, sorry, I'm starting to rhyme, so it must be true. What he said was 90 days, no, 60 days continuous exposure to combat turns 98% of participants into psychiatric casualties or psychological casualties, right? 60 days continuous exposure to combat where you think you might get shot at any minute. 98% casualties. He said the other 2%, they were sociopaths before they went into combat. And they find they thrive in an environment where they are not only allowed to kill people, they don't have to hold themselves back, they are rewarded for killing people. And he said they win a lot of medals, but they have a really high casualty rate because they cannot imagine themselves ever being hurt. Sociopaths before they go into combat. Growing up an army brat, fetal alcohol syndrome, daddy's a lawyer, totally protected, get away with whatever you want to do. All of a sudden you're in a place where you've got a gun and anybody who doesn't look like they're wearing your uniform is one of them. And you're fed up and fucked up and far from home and you're bored. And killing is fun. Remember what they taught the bloody Americans? Remember what they taught Lieutenant Kelly? Ambush is murder and murder is fun? Well, yeah, it is. For some people. For some people. And the people who find it fun, yeah, they're the sort of people who enlist and join in the military. And there's a lot of people who join the military. Some of them join up fervently hoping to get trained to do something useful, to serve a short amount of time, to never be sent into a war, to never have to kill a stranger. They just want to be paid. They want a career. They want the veterans' benefits when they come home. They want the better health care. They want the better pension. They want all of that shit. They're called career militarists. There are other people, they just want to play with really fucking expensive technology they can't afford to get their hands on. They wouldn't ever be allowed to have it in civilian life. And if they sign up with the military, they're allowed to have all the latest fucking machine guns and artillery and tanks and Humvees, drones, rocket bloody launchers. Or they join the Air Force and they get a fucking $100 million flame farting kerosene burning planet fucking machine. And they're allowed to play with that, you know. Maybe 50 hours on the simulator for every once. They're allowed to fly around the paddock because nobody can afford to maintain the fucking thing. If they're in the Navy, they get these great big marvellous fucking kerosene burning battleships that have turbo shaft engines in them, or they snub U Marines. It's a 30 years time we're going to get a nuclear version of them to frighten the Chinamen from attempting to get antsy in the South China Sea next week. And that's a different topic, which I'll get onto another day. So, where were I? Yeah, there's these people who join the military for different reasons. Now, most of the people, or some of the people, yeah, most of the people who are career militarists, they don't ever want to see combat. Some of the people who are in there for the death machines and the technology and, oh, fuck, I want to play with that thing. Couldn't you make a hole in that? Well, what could you do if you shot that at that over there? That kind, they go in not only wanting to play with the technology, but they train in peace while praying for war. And what they really want is to be deployed somewhere where they can try it all out. Benji Robert Smith might have been one of them. He wanted to get into combat so he wanted to get in the army so he could play with the guns, and he wanted to play with the guns so he could see how it felt to kill people. You know, there was a bunch of people gave testimony in evidence how he told them how much he liked killing, how much he got off on it. There were people who watched him. And because he brought the defamation case, it all went to court. It all went to court. Right? And the judge heard 105 days of it and said, nah, you were not defamed. You are a fucking murderous war criminal and a liar and a bully and a wife beater to boot, and you fucking tampered with evidence and tried to pervert the course of justice. Go away. So, yeah, there's now a big debate on whether they can take away his Victoria Cross, because I think it might have been King Edward, maybe King George, but I think it was King Edward. One of those inbred bloody pommy German bastards said that even a murderer should be entitled to wear his Victoria Cross on the scaffold while we hang him. So there's a school of thought that says he run up that hill into that machine gun fire, he gets to keep his VC. And everybody who thinks that that's scurrilous, that a fucking scoundrel like that should be so decorated, they should just bear in mind whether to believe it when the military tells you any fucking thing, because they'll tell you whatever they want to make you want to join the army, get your head shot off. Join the army, get your head shot off. Join the army, watch your children fucking die before they breed. That's the next point. Right? The children of combat veterans, according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare Statistics, the children of combat veterans, they display, they don't suffer from, they display, that's what the report says, they display 3 times, 300%, the annual suicide death rate of their age cohort. So however many 5-year-olds in the normal population kill themselves, 3 times that per capita rate among combat veterans' children kill themselves every year for the whole of their life. 3 times the suicide death rate if you've got a parent who's a combat veteran. Join the army, watch your kids drop dead. Fucking great, isn't it? And not only, but also 1.8 times the background death rates from accident, and not only, but also bonus extra, 1.2 times the death rate from illness. Why is it so? Maybe because if you grow up in a happy family and you get sucked into joining the military and you go off to a combat environment and you get head fucked and you come home with the PTSD, you can hold it together, but your kid grows up in a war zone, and if your fucking infancy and your childhood is blighted by living in a war zone, sucked in. 3 times the death rate from suicide. 1.8 times the death rates from accidents because, oh, fuck you, there's nothing to worry about. You'll be right. Get on the fucking motorbike and try again. Death by illness, well, sucking chest wound, that's nature's way of telling you to slow down. I remember when I was hopscotching in the minefield. Yeah. You got a parent who's a combat veteran, congratulations. Benjamin Robert Smith's children, if he's got any, 4 times the annual death rate. Forever. Goes on. Why do you think 56,000 Australians volunteered to die in World War I and only 29,000 volunteered to die in World War II? Even though we had twice as many people living on the continent. It's because all the DNA to make the sort of fucking brain that'll contain the sort of mind that says, let's run uphill into the machine gun fire. Yeah. Well, what was it? Fucking 5,700 of them dead at Gallipoli. 15,000 total casualties for 5,700 dead. You've got to actually study this shit before you know what's going on. And how do you compare that? 4 times the annual death rate. Just because your parents are combat veteran. Well, here's a couple of other things you can compare it to. If you are a military veteran and you never go into combat, you got twice the annual death rate. If you are a military veteran and you do go into combat, you got twice the annual death rate. Because there's no fucking difference between being in combat and not being in combat. What is the deciding factor is if you join the military. That's what doubles your suicide rate as a service personnel. Nothing to do with all of this crap that they're all bullied in the army. Not at all. Something happened to them before they went into the military, and the people who are damaged in such a way that they are predisposed to want to commit suicide, they are attracted to the military. They're also attracted to the police. They crave order. They crave neat, straight fucking lines. They crave being told what they can do and what they can't do. And they crave being told they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're a bad bastard. Let's go and punish them. That whole mindset sucks them in. Right? Or something that happens in basic training makes everybody who goes through it twice as likely to kill themselves. I think the army would probably prefer to look at it in the sense of They've got to do something to weed out the potential suicides, rather than say, oh, well, we're training these people to fucking hate their life and that's why they're killing themselves when they get stressed. Which way do you want to take it? Is it the military training, or is it something that happens to make suicides want to join the fucking military? Good question, isn't it? So what do we know that you can do to make somebody grow up to want to kill themselves? Well, I don't know what the statistics are since the Marriage Equality Act was passed in Australia, but before that, before the Equal Marriage, the Gay Marriage Act, as you want to call it, before that, if you were growing up same-sex attracted in a New South Wales inland regional town, right, your death rate from suicide between age 15 and age 25 was 6 times your age cohort in the local school who was not same-sex attracted. So growing up on the outside edge, feeling like you don't fit in, being bullied and taunted and hassled and, anxious your whole life as a child because, there's something different about you. Yeah, that makes people suicide. I don't have off the top of my head what the figures are for growing up as a Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander in Australia, but I know those people have got a really fucking high suicide rate, and I think that might be because of the intergenerational effect of colonisation. Their parents didn't get to raise them, their grandparents didn't get to raise them, their great-grandparents didn't get to raise them because the fucking pillars of community from Europe came out here and decided that they wanted to take the land and wipe out the population and let's just fucking dismantle their culture and make sure they don't know how to talk their language and they don't know how to keep their culture together because, rule Britannia. However, that's a different sidetrack, isn't it? That's a video we haven't made about the voice. Let's get back to the Ben Robert-Smith shit. How do you really make your kids want to fucking kill themselves? Okay, well, for here we got to go to the Melbourne University School of Medicine, and there's a 2010 report issued, published in the Australian Medical Association Journal in January, February 2010. I heard about it on Valentine's Day, God rest it. 14th of February, I heard it on the ABC Radio National News Bulletin at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was on again at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1. Wasn't on at 2 o'clock, right? But every hourly bulletin. And here's the story, and it headed the bulletin, and it ran, they gave you about a minute and a half on it. Melbourne University School of Medicine in 1965 started a long baseline program to observe the life outcomes of the surviving victims of childhood sexual assault. God knows how they got the money for it in 1965, but they did. And between 1965 and 1985, they collected 2,000 cases and they monitored them. And in 2005, they stopped collecting evidence, right? So they had 40 years on some people, observations, and 20 years on other people worth of observations. And then they spent 5 years crunching the numbers, and in 2010, they released the figures. And strap yourselves in. Regular viewers will have heard me say this before, but I keep getting back to it because so many people are, oh, why are people suiciding? Why are people suiciding? We don't know. Well, that's a fucking lie. They do know, and they don't fucking want to know, so they don't actually look at the data. The survivors of childhood sexual assault display, they don't suffer, they display an annual suicide death rate 18 times, 1,800% higher than their age cohort, and their deaths cluster 18 years after the abusive events. They also display 48 times the death rate from accidental drug overdose. And those deaths cluster 18 years after the abusive event also. It's like they can hold it together for 18 years or thereabouts, maybe 16, maybe 20, some indeterminate time, but clustering around 18 years after the kid fucker finishes with them, or maybe after the kid fucker starts molesting them. It all gets too much, and they either kill themselves or they take too much pain relief. So on the grand scale of things, like joining the military and condemning your kids to only 4 times the annual death rate, like it's nothing compared to sexually molesting them or leaving them with a sexual abuser. But there you go, and now you can put Ben Robert Smith, WC, war criminal, Wickedtory Creutzer, put him in perspective with all of the other people who do dumb and stupid shit to children. And their kids grow up to become fuck-ups, dysfunctional units, spraying fucking destruction and crap and chaos in their wake. And if they're high enough up the fucking totem pole, they're getting a big fat salary to do it too. Look at Donald Trump and Rupert Murdoch. There we go, and I think I've probably said most of the things that I wanted to rant about on that particular convoluted, complicated topic. But I don't know. It's entirely possible that the next thing that'll happen is Ben Robert Smith will either be found after having shot himself because he can't cope with the fucking disgrace, and he finally wakes up to the fact that it's only going to get worse from here because there is now absolutely no fig leaves for anybody in any government department to hide behind in order to protect him from the oncoming courts martials. Right? Because here's the other thing. If Australia fails to prosecute Ben Robert Smith, there's an American law which says US forces are not permitted to operate with the military forces of countries that shield war criminals. So either the army fucking prosecutes their most glorious warrior for being a cunt and a scumbag, or we just get used to not having America as Uncle Spam, keeping us safe from all the things that the fucking moneyed classes want to worry about. Join the army, get your head shot off. Join the army, watch your kids shot dead. Join the army. Sue 3 fucking newspapers for defamation because they told the truth about what a scumbag you are. Ben Robert Smith, wake up to yourself. Wake up to yourself. Fucking go and try and live a quiet life, you stupid prick. Stop trying to tell everybody to follow you. You're not representative of Australia, mate. You're nothing like an Australian. In fact, the one thing that Ben Robert Smith most reminds me of is the sort of prick who's got access to a gun, but they can't find anywhere to go and do some target practice, and they can't find anywhere to go and hunt. So they get a few mates and a slab of beer, and they get a couple of guns and some ammo, and they get in the car and they go for a drive, and they go out along the ring roads that surround more or less all Australian inland towns. They link up the travelling stock reserve, so you don't have to drive a mob of livestock through the centre of the town. You go out around the ring roads, and they drive around drinking their slab of beer, and they're looking for feral animals to shoot because they want to be fucking heroes. They want to find rabbits. They want to find foxes. They'd love to see a hare because they're bigger. They'd love to see a goat. In their wildest dreams, they see a deer or a pig, and they drive out until they've drunk nearly all the booze. And it might be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and they haven't found anything that needs shooting. So they turn around and they come home, and on the way back, they either shoot at eye glints in the paddock with their torch. Maybe they've got a spotlight, but it's illegal to shoot from the roadside, so they might not have a spotlight. And if they can't shoot at eye glints, which means a farmer's going to come and find sheep, cows, horses, goats, any livestock shot up in the paddock, and that happens with depressing monotonous regularity, or just go for a drive in Australia and have a look at the road signs. If you're in a rural area, somebody's coming home from a failed shooting expedition, and rather than go home and not even have to clean the gun, they blow holes in the fucking road signs. Well, Benjamin Robert Smith and his fucking loyal followers, They were out there in Absurdistan, living, getting fucking mortared and rocketed at random intervals, building up their PTSD, going slowly, quietly, do-lally, plop inside their own heads, and occasionally getting told to suit up in all your fucking hero gear, and we're going to go out and kill the bad guys. So with the sort of fucking military intelligence and information insights, which America can fucking supply to Australia about what's going on in Afghanistan, off they go. And they tromp around the fucking boonies all day, humping their great big 40-pound backpack full of shit to kill other people with, and they don't find nothing. And on the way, they haven't even got any booze to drink. They've got to get back home before they can do that. So fuck, we'll shoot that old cunt with one leg, and we'll take his wooden leg home, and we'll fucking drink the beer out of his wooden leg. I can't find any road signs or sheep to shoot in Afghanistan, so why not shoot the fucking locals? And that, Sonny Jim, is the psychology behind what got Benjamin Robert Smith, WC, war criminal, Wickedtory Creutzer, where he is today. Isn't he a hero? Yeah, isn't he a hero? Hasn't he fucking contributed a lot to humanity living on planet Earth? What a fucking prize idiot. If I was him, the first person I'd be cranky with is my parents for raising me to grow up to be a dickhead like that. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Okay, ciao.